is June. All right. Yeah. So it's officially started. So this webinar will be recorded and it will be available. So if in case you want to get a copy of this, pass it on to your colleagues or other team members within your organization, please do so. If you have any question during this webinar, please don't hesitate to ask us. We will be more than happy to answer any of your questions as we want it to be interactive. So without further ado, a big thank you to you guys that are attending this webinar. We all know that when it comes to attending webinars and meetings, there are plenty of choices. So thanks for giving us a portion of your day, and hopefully you can find value in our presentations and webinar series that we have on a monthly basis. With me is Bea. She's our marketing coordinator. I'm Armand Iqbali. I'm president and founder of IT Management Corporation, located headquartered in Santa Clara, California, with offices in North and South of California. With us is Josh with Gravity Gaming. He is the expert when it comes to uh, putting the structure for esports in K through 12. Yeah, he will go over his background and what he's done, which is quite impressive, and hope you can utilize him as an additional resource to get you from point A to point B. So one of the important part of this webinar is the giveaway. Um, so we are happy to tell you that we have a Lego set, the International Space Station. So if you have registered, we have your list, but there is a process in which you need to basically go through to participate in our raffle program today. So please go ahead and scan the QR code that's on your screen. And there you will have to enter your name, just give us your full name, and we will then run this to our text messaging engine that will just basically select the winner and we'll let you know. To win, you got to attend the webinar, and when we mention your name, you hopefully are still online with us so that we can get your information in order to mail you the Lego set. Again, this is a small token of appreciation for you guys to give us the time and the chance. And hopefully, apart from a Lego set, you get to learn a few things to empower your organization to use esports or enrich your existing esport program. IT Management Corporation, we've been around quite some time. People know us with our blue bags in different events throughout California, whether it's Site or CASBO. Our rolling blue bags are quite popular. If you haven't got one, let us know. You can schedule a meeting with us. There's a QR code for that. You can schedule a meeting with our team members. Our services are pretty much on unified communication, network infrastructure, wireless, and technologies for schools. We've been around a little bit over a decade, and we have various different expertise, work with Cisco, Aruba, Ruckus, and various different major brands when it comes to networking and systems. We have various different expertise and specialties, and we are a carrier when it comes to telecom. Some of you have seen us with 101 Voice, or you may have been using 101 Voice as a phone system for your organization. If you haven't, let us know, and we will be able to provide you some pricing and compelling reasons why you should consider 101 Voice for your school district. From technology perspective, from data infrastructure and physical layer all the way to application and security layer, that's basically what our expertise are. We partner with companies that are having great expertise to be able to augment what our services are. Example is ByteSpeed and their division Gravity Gaming that is being able to uh, be one of the major platforms for esports throughout many states in California, in United States. When it comes to procurement, we have CMAS, GSA, USC, TPA, NASPOR, and spare contracts. Gravity Gaming is on the CMAS and the GSA contracts, so for those of you who are curious to know, and it will basically be working through IT management for the procurement of Gravity Gaming products. If there are any of these technologies that you see that you have interest, please let us know. And without a further ado, I also want to let you know about our upcoming webinar next month. And that has to do with how to improve emergency response. That has to do specifically with 911 and PSAPs, or also known emergency call centers. How do you get the best way of communicating with them? There's Ray-Baum Act, Kerry's Law, NG 911, Mobile 911. There are various different technologies out there. There are various different requirements and new regulations out there. At the end of the day, when it comes to your campus, you want to basically make sure that you are being informed and you know of 911s that are taking place in your campus, even if somebody used their cell phone. So that's what this presentation is that we will have in July 14. Again, specifically around the E911, the NG911, what you should be doing and what you can do. Again, this is with 101 Voice. 101 Voice is a carrier in United States with various different services, and you don't have to be using 101 Voice as your telephone company in order to be able to use some of these services that we're going to be talking about. So hope we'll see you guys in that presentation, as it has to do with campus safety and it's becoming more and more important due to recent events. Then again, I want to remind you, if you have not done this registration, please go ahead. We're going to run the system, and at the end, we're going to basically pick a winner and mail this Lego set to that individual. So that being said, I will pass it on to Josh, and hope he will be able to answer all your questions and keep it interactive. And again, thanks so much for attending our webinar. Josh, it's yours.
Thanks so much, Armand. Great to meet everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Let me share my screen here and we'll get rolling. Okay. So yeah, the main topic today is just kind of going over a brief outline on how to start and manage your Scholastic esports program. A little bit about myself. My name is Josh Knutson. I'm the Esports and VR Solutions Director for ByteSpeed. Like Armand said, we're an IT manufacturing partner of our hosts today. Centered in Moorhead, Minnesota, and we've been kind of deploying esports solutions for about 5 years. We've been in business since 1999 doing other K-12 technologies, and we have a really big passion for gaming and for esports, and I was brought on in 2019. So it's been just over 3 years now for me at ByteSpeed to kind of help steer the initiatives and point us in the right direction. I am a former esports coach. I started my esports journey at the University of Jamestown in North Dakota. So if you hear some Norwegian, Scandinavian accent, that's why. I'm definitely not from California, although I am jealous of the weather. But I got my start at a college program, was actually a ByteSpeed customer. And we started one of the first 20 varsity level esports programs in the country at the collegiate level back in 2016. So I did that for 3.5 years. We built a really successful program from the ground up. And that's what I do in my day-to-day life now is share that kind of experience with schools and kind of guide them in starting their own programs. One other quick note to mention, I am an advisory board member for NACAD. That is the National Association of Esports Coaches and Directors. It's a great member organization, kind of like the coaching organizations for traditional sports out there. So you might have seen like a basketball coaches association or something like that. This is that group for esports, and I've been involved ever since the beginning. They've got kind of like a Netflix style model of professional development and training and resources that you can access all online. And it's made up of other high school and college coaches from across the US and Canada. So that's kind of who I am. If you have questions that we don't get to today or wonder about something, please feel free to get a hold of me. Shoot me an email, call, text, follow me on Twitter, whatever works for you. Would love to make sure that you're taken care of, even if we don't get to your questions today during the brief time that we have together for the webinar. So feel free to get a hold of me and connect. I would love to keep the conversation going. So what esports? It's exciting, it's new, but not everybody knows what it is or kind of why schools are starting programs, right? So I think when a lot of people, if they know about esports or if they've heard about it before, the labs or the spaces that you immediately think of are kind of like the picture here on screen, right? It's LED lights and high-end computers all over the place. Maybe it's blacked out and you've got blue light and stuff all over. This is kind of like your stereotypical esports setup. At the end of the day, it's a high-end computer lab, and we're doing competitive gaming out of these spaces. There's a ton of other reasons to start a program beyond just playing games, and we're going to talk about those in a second. But if you're new to esports or wondering what it is, think of sports, but video games. So we're playing competitively, school against school, player against player, in a number of different titles like League of Legends, Overwatch, Rocket League, just to name a few. And this has been sweeping the nation for, probably around 10 years now at this point. In the early 2010s, there were just a handful of high schools and colleges across the country that had programs. In 2016, 17, kind of in the middle of that decade, we started to see a huge expansion at the K-12 and the collegiate level. And now in June of 2022, there's 300 colleges and thousands of high schools across the country that have programs, and a ton of great activations happening in California right now. So that's just kind of like a 10,000-foot view of esports as a whole. But really, a big question that we get all the time is, why are schools doing this in the first place? And I think it's really important to have that guiding principle before we even talk about hardware or some of the other things that you need to get started. But you need to have a why for your school. And a lot of times that comes down to student engagement. It's by far and large the most popular reason why a school would start an esports program. For a really long time, you've had athletes that have played sports. They've done football, baseball, basketball, whatever it might be. You've had students that are involved in fine arts, band, choir, theater, stuff like that. But a lot of times there's a pocket of students in the middle that, aren't athletes, but they're still competitive, or maybe they're not involved in fine arts, or they're not musically gifted, or they don't like being up in front of people for acting or something like that. But esports is an opportunity for them to get involved for the first time. And that's really at the core reason why a lot of schools are starting programs, is to engage those students and give them an opportunity to actually be a part of the school in a greater way. So expanding those opportunities to participate in things and kind of being there to share the really great soft skills that you see in traditional sports and other after school activities. A little bit in the high school world, more so in the college world, that retention and recruitment of students. Say you've got a new family that moves to the area and they're trying to figure out what school to send their students to. Sometimes having an esports program is a draw for a student to want to go to that school. And it's definitely a way to keep students in school, keep them active in their education, make sure they're on the path to graduation, and really just giving them an opportunity to grow socially and emotionally. We see that with traditional sports, with other activities and clubs. You're learning communication skills, teamwork, critical thinking, all these different things that are really, impactful that you get from being a part of something. And for students that esports is their first activity, that's the gateway to learning those skills. So one kind of last thing to mention is that a lot of times programs that don't have a clear goal or a clear why, they often struggle with implementation and having their program succeed long term. So whatever it is, every school is different. Everybody's goals are different. But kind of keep in mind some of these examples of why you would add an esports program, and really have that guide you as you go along, setting up a facility, getting students involved, and actually, living out esports day to day in your school. Up next is kind of where in the process of starting a team, right? So we need a space for our students to live and for them to actually participate. So you want to keep in mind some of the core needs of a space. So obviously, capacity is super important. How many stations can we fit in a room? The average esports desk is about 4 feet wide and about 3 feet deep. And then you add a chair onto that. You can kind of get an idea of how many stations will fit in a room. A lot of times, accessibility is a big thing. Esports provides us this wonderful opportunity for students who haven't been able to participate in sports before, maybe because of a physical disability. They can now sit down next to an able-bodied student and be the same kind of team member and participating in the same way, in this really cool competitive aspect. So making sure that those students that have those extra needs can get into the room, that is super important. Other kind of needs of a space, if you're kind of looking at your school and saying, okay, we want to start a program, where am I going to put it? Obviously, power and internet are going to be two really big considerations. You want to make sure that you're not going to blow a fuse to half the school and knock out power when you plug in a bunch of devices. And internet, definitely having that wired connection. We'll talk a little bit about infrastructure in a bit, but making sure that you have drops or the ability to plug into Ethernet is super important. And you want to make sure that the lab or the space that you're going to move into is set up for these kind of extra needs of the esports program. HVAC and lighting might seem a little silly to have on here, but as somebody who started an esports program in a building that did not have working AC that summer, it was not fun. Most PCs nowadays don't throw a ton of heat. They're pretty power efficient. But when you have 20 machines and 20 bodies running around and you close the doors, it can get kind of warm. So you want to make sure that you're comfortable and that there's no extreme temperatures that are going to put your students or the equipment at risk of malfunctioning or being uncomfortable. And then the lighting thing, at the beginning of the presentation, you saw a picture of this dark, dim lab, right? This is the lab that I built at University of Jamestown. Back in the mid 2010s, this was kind of all the rage, the dark room, making sure that LED lights and the screens were kind of the only source of light. The older I get, maybe, or kind of, now that I've done this for a few years and seen other schools build out their own spaces, I'm a lot more a fan of this kind of brighter area. And you want to make sure that the students that are involved in esports, they're showing up not just to play video games, right? We're here to be a competitive team and to learn and to grow and get better, learn new skills. And you want an environment that's going to be conducive to that activity. You want to kind of set the tone when you walk into that space of like, hey, we're here to have fun, certainly, but we're also accomplishing other things. So having, lights that maybe they're not fluorescent lighting, but maybe you can dim them, or having natural lighting with windows and stuff. That I'm more of a fan of that kind of a space nowadays. And then lastly, will this be a multi-purpose space? A lot of schools will start esports programs kind of in conjunction with either an academic component where they're teaching esports stuff in the classroom and then kind of practicing that out in the after school activity, or they're dual purposing the machines for other curriculum-based projects in the school. So you might have an Adobe lab or something like that, or you might be doing engineering or project lead the way or something like that, where you need higher end devices for the software and the coursework that you're doing. And then, oh, by the way, at the end of the day, we've got a machine that's got a graphics card, enough RAM, the other requirements to play games at a good rate, and kind of using the machines for more than just one use case. So if you've got other teachers, other student groups that are coming into the space and they need to use that equipment, you want to make sure that their needs are also met. And so then the next question is like, what do we actually put in this lab? What do I need to get started? You might be wondering, like, I have never done esports before. I don't know what we're going to do. So I want you to kind of keep in mind a conversation of needs versus wants. Be mindful of your budget and the space available, and kind of keep in mind the analogy of, a Ferrari is really cool and I would really like one, but will a Toyota Camry get me from point A to point B for a really long time, reliably, safely, and do just as good of a job? So definitely kind of keep in mind, be responsible with your money. There's ways to stretch it, use existing equipment, and really build out an awesome facility for your students. So as far as priorities for equipment go, and kind of the checklist that you're going to want to go through, definitely infrastructure is at the top. It's a digital sport. We need to be online to actually, play and access that content. And then PCs is generally kind of where we're going to land as far as equipment is concerned. That's the preferred platform. There is some console stuff. And then, peripherals, furniture, decor for the space, kind of all ancillary things to the main components. I did see there was a chat deal here. Just a reminder to text your full name for that raffle giveaway. So let's kind of dive into infrastructure just for a brief second. I think people get intimidated when they talk about, okay, we're adding an esports space to our school. I want to have this program. I'm concerned that my school's internet is not going to be good enough to play and have a good experience. I've got good news for you. Generally, your connection and what you have in the school right now is going to be just fine to start. You don't need to go overboard on internet connectivity for the simple reason that, during the day, you might have 200-300 extra devices walking around. Maybe you're a one-to-one school, or maybe there's a bunch of labs that are doing stuff throughout the day. You've got a lot of devices accessing the internet throughout the day. But at 3 o'clock or whenever the school day is done, a lot of those devices are shut down and they're not being used, right? So your, esports lab, however big it is, typically are some of the few devices left over at the end of the day that are going out and accessing your bandwidth. So to get started, you can pretty safely, just boot stuff up and use your kind of existing connection. This might be something to where, you start it in the first year and it's fine, you get by, but the experience might not be great. Then in year 2 or year 3, after you've kind of tested it out, that's a great opportunity to go in and say, okay, here's where we're going to spend a little extra money, increase the bandwidth to this room or to this building, and try and improve things down the line. When I started at Jamestown, we had a separate VLAN for our 15 machines that we started with in the college facility. So we were separated from the rest of campus. We had a little bit different security requirements, a little bit different setup for the internet structure that we were on, as opposed to, the dorms, the other classroom buildings, stuff like that. And we were just on a 500 meg connection for that first year for those 15 computers. And that worked fine. We did kind of make the decision that in year 2, we added some more computers. We were up to like 24 devices. And that was kind of when we noticed that our existing 500 meg was kind of struggling to keep up, especially when we had to do updates and kind of, really download a lot of things throughout the week. So then we did decide in year 2, we moved to a gig for that room. And that was, awesome and totally as much as we needed for that facility that we built out. A couple of things, like I mentioned, having a separate network or a separate VLAN for your esports machines is kind of a really nice thing just for management's sake. Your firewalls are going to have different permissions that you're going to need to open up to be able to access the games. My guess is that your existing K-12 Scholastic's firewall that you have running is going to block Steam and the Blizzard launcher, or some of the platforms that you need to access to actually play the games. So a lot of times your network admin will have to go in and open up some ports in that firewall. And every school kind of has a different approach about how they want to handle this. Some schools will open up the machines just wide open for a set amount of time. And that's only when there's an administrator in the room or a coach in the room that can monitor what the students are doing on those machines. Other schools will kind of open up just specific applications and allow access that way, and have admin passwords that have to get entered in anytime there's a change made, a new file gets downloaded, or a new update happens. So really, a conversation for you guys watching is to go to your IT staff or to go to your network administrator and have a conversation about how you want to handle access to the games for esports. It's super important to have that conversation early on, and it'll save you big headaches down the road. Again, just making sure that you're playing on a wired connection over Wi-Fi if you can manage it. I know not every school has the ability to do that, but if you can, look at facilities that have either existing drops in the room to where you can plug in maybe it's a switch that you're going to plug in and pass that bandwidth along through Ethernet cables to the new devices that you bring in, or maybe it's already wired up and in the walls, and all you have to do is connect them. Or maybe it's a space that you can just run a drop over, and run cabling as you set up the space and run a new drop over there. Not always able to happen, but if you can, it's going to vastly increase your experience. And your students are going to have a better time playing. Wi-Fi can be unstable and unreliable. There's a lot more devices hooked up to individual access points. So it might struggle if you've got gaming PCs that need to do a little bit more than just open up Google and do a web search. So try and play on a wired connection if you can. And then managing those updates is really important too. The game of football has remained very similar for the last 50 years, right? League of Legends has a patch every 2 weeks, a rules update every 2 weeks, to where you have to re-download the game or re-download new information and patch it into the existing files to be able to be playing on the current rule set for that game. Every esport title has updates that happen at a regular cadence. It might be, once or twice a week. It might be every 2 weeks, every month, every quarter. Just really depends on how often the game is worked on by the developers. So you want to be ready for that. And, to think that, okay, if I've got a facility of 15 computers and then all of a sudden Overwatch drops a 3 gig update, how long is it going to take for all 15 of my machines to do that update before we can actually even play the game? You don't want to be caught at okay, hey, we've got a game at 4 o'clock and then we get to the lab and turn the machines on and we've got 10 minutes before we're supposed to start. And then it's going to take half an hour to download all of the new information that we have. So finding, either off hours to do those updates or work with a caching solution or something to kind of help speed up that downloading that new information and running those updates is another thing to talk with your team about and kind of come up with a strategy for. And really it's up to you, depending on, the school and the comfort level of your staff. Every school is different. Every staff is going to have a different strategy for this, but that's kind of what we've seen in the past. So computers, what are we actually playing on? Esports is a digital sport. We need a way to access the internet, and that mostly happens on PC. It's the preferred platform for a number of different reasons. Mainly, you can get better performance out of a PC than a console in most circumstances. There are some games out there that are console only. So, stuff like Super Smash Brothers, that's super popular, especially in the K-12 space. That is a game that only is played on the Nintendo Switch. So, you would need to, if you're starting a new program, look at PCs and then maybe one console. There's other games out there like the sports titles, NFL, Madden, NHL, 2K, all those kind of titles. FIFA is another good example there. That can be cross-platform. It can be on console or PC. But generally, most schools will start with a computer. You'll have the most the largest library of titles to be able to play will come off of a PC. And if you have players that are concerned of like, oh, well, I don't play games with a mouse and keyboard, you can connect a controller that you would have for a console up to a computer and be able to have kind of that same experience that way. So a big question about, that we get asked all the time is how many devices do we need? What do we do to get started? And really that's going to come down to, what games are you playing and what's that minimum roster required to play the game. So you might have a Overwatch, for example, right now is 6-on-6. When Overwatch 2 launches, that'll drop down to 5-on-5. Most team games are 5-on-5 in esports. But Rocket League, which is the most popular esports at the high school level, is just 3-on-3. So, it is 1-to-1 per student per device. So you'd need to have 3 computers to start and play Rocket League as a team against another school. A lot of times what schools will do is take that minimum requirement and double it so that they can have an A team and a B team and play against each other in practice. So you might have, if you're going to start with Rocket League, let's grab 6 computers and be able to run, 2 teams and play that game against each other. Or, maybe you want to start with some of the bigger team games like League of Legends or Overwatch, then maybe we grab 10 to 12. The national average, as far as what high schools will start with, is kind of around like 10 to 15. And that's kind of follows very, very closely to that, what's the minimum number times 2. And then you can build it out over time. There's a lot of schools that we've worked with that have started with, 10 machines in their first year. They had 80 students come knocking on the door and they're like, we need more computers. Because that's the other thing that you're going to want to keep in mind, right? Is, because we need a device to participate, you're going to need to kind of balance practice times or involvement of students, based on the number of devices that you can have. Because if I've got 10 machines, that's great for the 10 students that get to sit down and play. But if I have 50 kids in my program, what do the other 40 students do during that practice time when they can't be on the computer? And there's other ways that you can engage those students, either through content creation or streaming, having students be analysts or coaches, working with social media. The list is long with kind of the auxiliary positions and opportunities to participate. But, the core participation, the kids actually playing the game, are going to be limited by the number of devices you have. As far as specs go and like what's actually in those computers, we've got a couple of really good things going for us. Number one, most esports titles are optimized to run well on lesser end hardware. You think of a game like League of Legends has been around for 10 plus years, and for a long time we used to joke that you could play that game on a toaster. They're optimized to run on hardware that was started to be a thing 10 years ago. So a lot of times you can get away with kind of minimum spec requirements and then take into consideration some future proofing. Some example builds that ByteSpeed kind of runs with, and this would be kind of like what I would consider a gold standard for esports. On the entry level side, we're talking something like an i5 or a Ryzen 5, 16 gigs of RAM, an SSD for storage, an entry level GPU, something like a 1660 Super or TI or something like that, standard heatsink, and a 650 watt power supply. That is kind of like your quintessential entry level esports build. It's going to run almost every esports title out there. You're not going to be turning on ray tracing or having your settings cranked up to ultra, but this will play the game. It'll give your students a good experience, and you'll be able to participate no problem. If you've got a little bit more money in the budget, or you want to dual purpose some machines or have other curriculum projects happening on them, maybe we look at the mid-tier option, something like an i7 or Ryzen 7, still 16 gigs of RAM. RAM for gaming is kind of like where you see diminishing returns after 16. For true just gaming performance, 16 gigs is kind of the sweet spot. If you're going to stream or do video editing or something like that, maybe you go to 32 then, but you can kind of stay in the 16 lane and be totally fine. Again, SSD for storage. Maybe we crank up the graphics card to a 3060 or something kind of current. Excuse me. And then, again, same standard heatsink and power supply. And this will run games and a lot higher quality. It'll run more of those taxing titles at higher frame rates, and will be rock solid for gaming. I do notice that Paul threw a question in here. Do players usually run games on lowest settings to minimize lag anyway during online play? Absolutely, yeah. So there's like, when you look at a game, you can either make it look pretty or you can make it perform fast and well. And there's oftentimes when you sit down and you're going to be in a competitive atmosphere, you're going to turn a lot of those extra graphical assets off. Turning down shaders, making shadows either non-existent or just kind of barely there. Turning off things like VSync or DL, some of the, I forget what it's called. But you're going to be turning those settings down to maximize the amount of frames that you get out of the game. So yeah, entry-level specs oftentimes lend themselves really well towards that kind of an environment. Peripherals, stuff to go alongside that PC tower. Displays, you're looking at 24-inch monitors and 144 hertz is kind of like the gold standard. You really want to look for that refresh rate and response time. So 144 hertz is kind of like the sweet spot for entry level, and also high-end stuff too. That's kind of like the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone. I will say right away, right now, that paying for a curved monitor does not give you a competitive advantage. A lot of times, your flat standard monitor is totally fine, and is going to save you money that you just don't need to spend extra on that curve. If you're getting into a super competitive atmosphere, maybe you look at something like a 240 hertz monitor. Those really only come into play for like your really fast-paced first-person titles. But kind of the gold standard, kind of where 99% of all the monitors that we use for schools that go through ByteSpeed is this 24-inch 144 hertz. Keyboard and mice, you want to look for stuff that's mechanical. There's a couple of different reasons for that. Definitely the more responsive keystrokes or clicks from those devices, they're going to be tuned for gaming. You can have different keycaps or different switches on the keyboards that will register keystrokes with different levels of pressure, different I'm going to press this key a little bit harder, a little bit lighter. They're going to be more customizable overall and just kind of last longer than your cheap basic mouse and keyboard. And then finally, headsets. You want to make sure that you find something that's over the ear. Game audio is super important, and having the ability to hear your teammates through a Discord call or being in the same in-game team chat, making sure that they can talk to one another with that microphone. Those are definitely things to look for. With peripherals, you do not need to break the bank on really good quality accessories. We're talking in the ballpark of like $50 to $75 for a keyboard, for a mouse, for a headset. A monitor is probably going to run closer to $200, $250 for the good ones. But it's not like we're spending thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars on mice and keyboards and headsets. But they make a big difference. And this is definitely some place where, if you're not ready to buy new PCs, but you want to kind of start an esports program and kind of do a very like low budget, dip your toe in the water kind of thing, adding gaming peripherals to an existing lab that you have is a really good way to kind of, like I said, test the waters. And it can kind of give you that proof of concept that you might need. Next question is how. You might be thinking, hey, Josh, this all sounds great, but that sounds expensive. We're talking, 10 to 15 computers, a bunch of peripherals. What if I need furniture or lighting or other stuff? How do I pay for this? And really, budgeting for esports can happen in a number of different places. There are some schools that will, just pull it out of an annual budget for a department, whether it's athletics or student life, IT, underwater basket weaving. It doesn't matter. Some schools are lucky enough to do that. Not everybody can, though. So there's some really great funding resources out there that will help schools that just, they might not be able to just set aside dollars today for a project. A lot of schools will do grant writing projects for those kind of STEM academic based dual purpose kind of machines. We've got a really great resource on the ByteSpeed website. It's bytespeed.com/resources/funding. We have 70-ish different education grants that are linked on that page. Everything from Carl Perkins, career and tech ed money, all the way down to, stuff used for Project Lead the Way, or, different grants out there that schools can use to fund a curriculum-based project. So again, kind of going back to that dual purpose model of, we need new computers to do Carl Perkins kind of career tech exploration, right? So we wrote a grant, we're going to get money for this. And then, oh, by the way, at the end of the day, those machines that we bought with the Perkins money also can be used for esports. That is an example that we've seen time and time again be really successful. And actually on the ByteSpeed website, if you go to that link, the very first one should be a Perkins proposal that we wrote with the school for virtual reality stuff that they also use for esports. So please feel free to check that out. There might be other grants, especially in like the state of California, that are, California specific stuff to help kind of further education. There are schools that have used Escher Monday, kind of some of the COVID relief dollars to help free up budget for projects like this. So there's a lot of outside resources that can come in to help pay for that program. Some of the other stuff, just real brief kind of mention for fundraising, stuff like eTeam Sponsor. It's a crowdfunding platform that, actually, I think one of their examples on their website for a really long time was a school in California, their football program, totally funded just by using eTeam Sponsor. And then there's raffles and other things that you can do. One of my favorite fundraising stories was a school that we work with in Illinois. They built an arcade cabinet during the school year as part of their class project. And then they raffled off tickets for that arcade cabinet at the end of the year. They just built it with a Raspberry Pi in their middle school computer science class. And they raised like $4,000 off of that fundraiser. So don't be afraid to get creative. And then lastly, just like sponsorships and partnerships and stuff talk to your booster clubs or local businesses that are really supportive of your schools and get them involved. A lot of times they're willing to support stuff that the schools are doing. So don't be afraid to reach out. And just as a refresher, what is in my setup? It's a PC, peripherals. Maybe we have an ergonomic desk or chair. That's one esports station. So then who do we play with? This is great. We've built a facility. We've got a bunch of kids excited, but who do we actually play with? State of California right now, there's a lot of schools involved with the high school esports league. And that's just highschoolesportsleague.com. They run kind of regional and nationwide tournaments throughout the year. A couple of different seasons to be able to participate in. Oftentimes esports is a year-long thing. It can be broken up into a couple of different kind of seasons. You might have like a fall major like HSCL has that runs September to December with playoffs. You might be in the spring, January to April. And then they actually do a summer kind of open tournament that runs in June and July. So lots of different times throughout the year that you can sign up through their website, get involved, and start playing against other schools in California, in the West. And be able to actually participate and use your equipment and get your students engaged. They've got a ton of different titles. I've got them listed on here. But really the biggest thing or the biggest takeaway is that if you've got students that want to play a game, there's probably a tournament out there for them to join. And if you give them that structure of a facility to come to, a coach or a sponsor for their program that can help them with kind of guiding their journey through esports, of practicing and playing against other schools, you can see some really amazing things pop up. And you get all of those benefits of students, learning those leadership roles, learning those soft skills, and really having an amazing time that they might not have had a chance to before. So that's really all I got. Is there a middle school league, Angela asks, or is it only high school at this time? So the parent company for the high school esports league is called Generation Esports, and they actually run a middle school esports league as well. The majority of stuff out there is more geared towards high school, but there are some middle school stuff popping up around the country. And Generation Esports definitely runs a middle school league right now. The number of titles or kind of the different games that are played at the middle school level versus the high school level is a little different. A lot of times they follow kind of like the ESRB rating. So like if you see a game is rated T for teen, it's probably just played in the high school. But stuff like Rocket League, Super Smash Brothers, those are super popular games that are played at the middle school level and the high school level. So. All right. And that's really all I got, guys. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Paul. I appreciate Josh. Thank you so much for giving us so much information. And I want to bring again to everybody's attention that we do have a raffle going on, and the number of people that attended and registered is quite a bit, but we do see that there are some people that have not yet registered. So we encourage you guys to go ahead and register. The thing that we are getting a feedback from our team members is that due to the number of registration and interest, we're going to actually do a secondary prize in addition to the grand prize that you see on your screen. The secondary prize is a Pebble Beach polo shirt. So for those who are essentially are not able to get the grand prize because there's only one of them, then there is a chance to win the secondary prize, which is a Pebble Beach polo shirt. So that being said, the other question that has come up, Josh, is that from the beginning to pretty much go live on the eSport program, what is the average duration? How long does it usually take to actually go from zero to hero, if you will? Not winning all the state championship, but what's the timeline usually?
So usually if a school is starting from nothing and they want to get a program up and running, usually I would say from our experience, a few months is kind of how long it takes. Depends on if you have a facility that you can move into right away. A lot of schools will start looking at equipment and kind of getting a plan made a year out or 6 months out, kind of planning a semester ahead. And that way, they have time to talk to their technology partners, make sure they have a plan in place, get a coach hired or picked, and then kind of set all of those dominoes up to be able to start participating. So I would say, if you really wanted to, a lot of schools right now, you could start stuff. If you started here in June, you could have a team up and running by, mid-fall. But I would say a lot of schools, if you don't have something in your school right now, try and plan for like January. Start the second half of the year, get kind of a good, solid foundational plan in place. Skip the fall season, get everything moved in, get your program set, and then start participating in at the start of the next semester.
All right, perfect. And the next question that has come up is that given all these chipset shortages that everybody faced with, from automotive to various different things and computer sets and so forth, what do you see out there from product availability? I mean, these computers that you're referring to are not your small little guys. They're decent computers, obviously. And what's the availability and how does Gravity Gaming come into play?
Sure. Yeah, it's a great question because that's definitely supply chain has been kind of all over the place in the last 2 years. Right now, I would say if you worked with us, 3 weeks is a safe bet as far as like from time we get a PO to time stuff ships. We've been really lucky compared to a lot of companies, and we've been able to secure stock and work with our partners in the manufacturing space to be able to have inventory consistently rolling in. We constantly have parts coming in, and we try and stay flexible to where, if we're working with a SKU that's, hey, we're going to build out this machine, and when it's time to ship that computer, and maybe we've got a different version of a graphics card comes in, they come in different styles or different SKUs. Maybe we just switch to another similar product part, and that's let us, ship stuff quickly and consistently throughout the course of the last 2 years through the pandemic. So be proactive if you're a school that's looking at buying equipment. Talk to Armand and his team and start that process now so that we can kind of build an idea of what you'd be looking for, and then just kind of consistently working with them and kind of learning about lead times. Right now, 3 weeks is kind of a safe bet. Summer's definitely a busy time for a lot of schools. A lot of people's budget rolls over at the end of June. So it's a busy time for us, but 3 weeks is usually about as long as it takes. And then just being open to being flexible on, the build that you're looking at, and knowing that it's going to be an awesome product at the end of the day.
Cool. We got about 7 more minutes left. There are more questions coming up, Josh, so if you can address those. Meantime, what I have on the screen is a QR code for scheduling a meeting with us. So since there are things coming up, if you guys want to basically book a meeting with one of our consultants, you just basically take it next step further. Here's the QR code on the display. Go ahead, Josh.
Perfect. Yeah. So I did notice that Paul had a quick question. I'm at a middle school level. What's the process do you recommend to allow students to play games like Overwatch or Fortnite? Are there parent permission forms, templates, district board approval templates that we can use? Long story short, Paul, there's not like a one size fits all template that we could send you. But a lot of times what will happen is that the school, the teacher, coach, or whatever that's involved will work with the school board to draft a parent permission release or something like that allows them to play. You might already do something like this to watch, movies in class or for field trips and stuff like that. You could use that existing kind of permission form and just tweak it to fit esports and just have the language in there saying, this game is rated T for teen. Do you as a parent consent to having your student play this game under the supervision of a coach or adult that's going to be in the room with them? That would be the best way to go about it. Every school kind of handles that differently, but kind of a lot of schools just will kind of make their own permission form. And that's a great question. Adrian asks, are schools adding esports to their curriculum? Yes, absolutely yes. A group called NASEF, N-A-S-E-F, that actually worked with University of California, Irvine, right in your guys' neck of the woods, relatively. I'm in Minnesota, so everything's relative to you guys. But NASEF and UCI worked together to actually build out some curriculum that's under the state of California, that is built for high school computer science, English, and oh gosh, I forget what the other one is. But there are schools that are building in either lessons into those existing classes to have kind of an esports spin on it. There's other things that you can go through, like, okay, building a computer in class or writing for esports journalism or stuff like that. If you go to nasef.org, there's a curriculum tab, and it's all free as far as I know. And you should be able to download some examples. And I know they've got a lot listed. There's a ton of different variations on this. There's other groups throughout the country that are kind of building esports curriculum. And actually, I think even HSEL, that high school esports league, they have something that's kind of like an esports 101 course that you can access to. So yes, there's tons of curriculum stuff out there. We have a question sent by email. We are most interested in training for teachers who are not gamers themselves. I have a teacher who's willing but knows nothing about esports. That is a great place to start. You are in good company. There are a lot of teams and programs from across the country that, the superintendent has gone to somebody and said, hey, Josh, you're the history teacher, but now you're also the esports coach. Go figure it out. And there's a lot of resources out there to help with that. NACAD, the group that I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, that's the National Coaches Association. They have a ton of resources online. It's like 100 or so different hour-long courses that cover things like, how do you build out your facility? How do you, coach a game better? What does my student mental health outlook look like with esports? How do I combat toxicity and things like that? They've got a ton of resources there that you can look into and grab and kind of learn from as you go. The other thing that I tell people all the time is that you don't have to be a gamer to be a good coach for esports. A lot of times, those students need someone to be, for lack of a better word, the adult in the room. Be able to kind of help them with scheduling and contacting the schools that they're playing against, doing some of the administrative tasks of like signing up for tournaments or making sure that, when there's conflict within the team, that it's settled in a productive and positive way. You can do all of those things right away, knowing nothing about esports. And then you can learn the game as you go. There's also a ton of great tutorials and things online that you can search for, YouTube videos and stuff like that are geared towards, helping you get better at games and just kind of understanding esports as a whole. So there's a lot of really good free content out there. The NACAD membership, I think, is like $150 a year, and that has access to a bunch of those things. There's coaching clinics that happen that you can sign up for and travel to. Oh gosh, what else is there? And the other thing too is just talk to schools in your area that already have a team. That map of California that I pulled up had a lot of dots on it. So there's schools already in the state that have successful programs up and running. And I think you'll find out that with the esports community at large, people are willing to share their success stories and share those best practices and be able to help you out if you just ask. So I would say, if you know of a school close by or in the state that you've heard of has a team, call or email their coach and just say, hey, can I talk to you for an hour and kind of get the basics? And I think you'll find that the esports community is more than willing to share kind of that secret sauce of being able to be successful.
All right, Josh, thank you so much. The raffles have basically been closed kind of thing right now. And what we have is that there was one individual that was the grand prize winner, and there was the second winners, and text message has all gone to them. Want to also indicate that there is a webinar next month regarding 911 and how to work with PSAP and how to get quick response when there is emergency, and how you can be in compliant with RAFFLE Acts and Kerry's Law. Also, there are other regulations that are coming down when it comes to 911 and public safety, especially in the schools when unfortunate things has happened in the past. So please go ahead and register for that webinar. It is essentially more informative, and obviously as a system integrator of VAR and a company that we basically provide our services, there can be additional conversations we can have regarding how to obtain those services. But there's about 80%, 70% of that presentation is going to be information about, for example, mobile 911. If you have a middle school campus, more than 55% of their students do have cell phones with them. And if they call 911, how would your staff within the campus be notified that there is a 911 call within your campus, that you can essentially have a quicker response? Or when the first responders show up, you at least know what is the nature of that 911 call. These are in compliance with regulations of RAFFLE Acts and Kerry's Law, and does not require any software installation of any application on anybody's phone. So I just want to make sure I encourage people to register for that webinar. Let's see if there is any more last minute questions we have, Bea, in the system.
Yes, so we do have one last question. So this is for Josh. Do you see this to be beneficial to sports activities leagues outside of the education space?
Yeah, I mean, the short answer is yes, absolutely. It's another way to get more students involved. You're adding another sport to your roster. So, for those leagues that are already operating, kind of more outside the educational space, but more in the competitive sports world, that's where esports was born. Competition, sending one school against another, or a group of students playing against someone else in a tournament. Hugely beneficial. You're bringing together community, you're offering more opportunities to get involved, and you're learning those skills that we've seen in other sports leagues for hundreds of years. You're seeing that same growth happen with esports. So yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Looks like that wraps up most of our questions from the chat and from the Q&A portion here in Zoom.
All right. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, and I appreciate giving us the time. The recording will be available, and here in IT management, we plan, deploy, and manage IT, mostly in schools and government entities.